On July 9th, just 2 days before this video was made, Bungie released a new update that contains some very important information regarding the Menagerie 6-man activity. Before this update, you could complete the Menagerie, then farm the chest as much as you were able to before the endgame timer ran out. This allowed for a small handful of items pickups before being sent to orbit. After said update, you can now only loot the chest a single time. If you're not familiar with the activity, your initial thought might be, wow, that sounds like it was really broken. I'm glad this was fixed. If you are familiar with the activity and have spent countless hours in there yourself, you're most likely thinking the complete opposite. I'd like to discuss a few reasons why I think this fix was a bit of a mistake and could severely damage the population of the Menagerie activity, and I'd also like to discuss a few solutions. I'd like to start off by pointing out that the Menagerie has been a very hot topic over the last few weeks. It has been played quite heavily by the community and has been coming with a plethora of positive feedback. The community loves knowing the loot they will receive and getting a good amount of it. A lot of games based on loot and farming must feel very rewarding. You must feel as if your time investment is worth it and that the activity rewards you accordingly. Completing a full Menagerie run does take quite a bit of time, especially if not with a full organized group. And this is totally fine and worth the grind the first few times on each character every week, especially given the fact that you can choose which piece of gear you need the most. This is a wonderful loot selection system and a step in the right direction for loot going forward. Given you have one of each character, this is 9 guaranteed power drops each week with a handful of opulence mods coming along with it. However, most people aren't really running Menagerie for powerfuls anyway, but after all that is done, here's where the main problem arises. One area where I think Destiny could improve upon is its build system. Having specific builds for certain situations do exist, but I'd love to see more of it. Right now it relies heavily on RNG from random drops throughout the world or from powerful drop weekly activities. It's also not a very broad system by any means, but certain things like enhanced loader gauntlets, ability regen perks, ammo reserves, and ammo scavengers start to piece things together. What the Menagerie chest farm did was allow us to farm and farm for very specific missing pieces to dream builds that we thought up. Instead of settling for mediocre, we'd spend days and weeks farming runes, then putting those runes into the chalice and crossing our fingers in hopes of getting that final piece that we needed. Even with the chest farm method, many of us still don't have anything that we've been hunting for. And now with the single chest loot at the end, you can forget about grinding out that perfect build. The time investment took a huge crash, and that rewarding feeling of having a day's work of loot to sift through has been greatly diminished. What will happen now is that players will settle for less. They will settle for mediocre gear with mediocre rolls. Once they get that mediocre piece, grinding will slow down or potentially stop, and they will move on from the activity. This is what I'd hate to see from the population. I'd also like to discuss runes. Runes are something we've been grinding non-stop for since the DLC launched. It's essentially the currency for our chalice. We spend time rune farming it so that we can spend them all, increasing our chances of getting what we want. With the latest update, we will now only be able to spend a fraction of what we used to be able to. Many players are now sitting on a mountain of runes so big that we couldn't spend them all now even if we tried. Reward us for our time invested into rune farming. Don't limit it. It almost feels wasted. So let's talk about time. Let's say, for example, the Menagerie run takes approximately 15 minutes for an average group. Let's say you have 4 hours to play that night. That's going to come out to roughly 13 to 15 Menagerie runs. This is accounting for orbit time, launching or flying into the activity, checking loot, etc. With the old system, let's say you could loot the chest 5 times, and let's say that 2 of those times were going to give you a double drop, assuming that your chalice was fully upgraded. That accounts for about 7 total items each run, 5 without any doubles. So that is a range from 70 to 98 items over the course of your entire playtime. Keep in mind, you're searching for that perfect item, so the chances of you getting exactly what you're looking for are slim. Maybe you got something useful, maybe you didn't. Enhanced perks are extremely rare. Either way, You close up shop for the day, scrap all the bad rolls you got, and get ready for another day of grinding. You do feel rewarded for your day. You feel as if your time was used wisely. Showering loot isn't always a bad thing. I think that's important to note. It's not like we're showering rare, raid-specific drops or a constant supply of powerful drops. It's regular, low power level drops in hopes of achieving that god build we discussed earlier. Is this reward system maybe a bit much? Sure, I'm not denying that. It's clearly a lot of loot, but that's where I'll offer suggestions later in the video. Now let's take a look at the loot system, the single chest system. The new system after the update. Same time played, same number of clears, same chance of doubles being dropped. Our range now drops to 14 to 19 items over the course of the same playtime. Once again, that range went from 70 to 98 down to 14 to 19. That is a huge drop. Players are definitely going to notice that. You're going to have much less items to sift through over an entire night's worth of playing. This is where the settling for mediocre items idea comes into play. You won't be as excited to go through that grind all over again the next day. So a question you might ask is, well, if Bungie just gave us infinite loot all the time, then we'd have everything we'd want. Therefore, we'd stop playing the activity and it won't last for the entirety of the season. Normally, I would agree with you entirely, and you know this. However, the way the loot system is set up for the Menagerie changes this situation. I know I keep going back to this point, but it's all about pinpoint grinding for very specific perks, something we haven't had the luxury of before in Destiny. There's definitely a middle ground here. If you damage the amount of loot that we receive from an activity too much, we will acquire pieces that will get us by, but ultimately stop playing as much because it becomes too much of a chore. If you give us an opportunity to grind more loot, like before the update, we will spend more time hunting for what we need to finish off that specific build. What's happened is the way that we are used to playing the brand new activity has drastically changed. Think of Riven, for example. Imagine if you couldn't one floor kill Riven anymore, or even a couple weeks or a month or two after the DLC drop. Yes, it's not that hard to complete the fight using multiple floors and shooting eyes. Yes, it should have been like that from the start. However, the community quickly got used to the one floor strat, and it may turn people away from the activity if the way we are forced to play it changes too much. Keep in mind, this is just a totally random example and not to be taken too literally. Ever since Menagerie dropped, we have been accustomed to a particular reward system. Those who haven't played it much or at all obviously won't notice any difference, but may still feel unrewarded after a week or so of playthroughs. And I don't think I need to continue to beat a dead horse when talking about those who have been grinding it non-stop since launch. So we also have a heroic Menagerie option at our hands. This is a nice dip to try to get that Menagerie ship or sword and a guaranteed masterwork item on your first clear of each character every week. But after your first clear, and once you get that ship or sword, then what? Why struggle through brutal modifiers on heroic when you could just run normal mode and hunt for the same gear? There's literally no other incentive to run heroic after that first clear and once you get the ship or sword if you are a collector. So let's start talking about some solutions. 1. This one's pretty simple. Drop more loot chests at the end. Fair and easy. Maybe 2 chests for normal mode with a possible 3rd chest thrown in if you 100% every encounter leading up to the boss. I know this might not be the most popular with the 100%. However, think about it. This would encourage you playing the activity with lots of effort instead of just letting the encounter auto-complete. How about dropping more chests for a heroic clear? Maybe 3 chests with the potential of an extra chest if you 100% every encounter leading up to the boss. On top of heroic Menagerie, I think there needs to be more incentive to play it. On top of the higher number of loot chests per clear for heroic, maybe change the loot table a bit. How about every armor piece that you craft for a heroic clear has an extremely high chance to drop with an enhanced perk? This is what we are hunting for, so give us a reason to hunt for it. 3rd, let's talk about chalice adjustments. How about once you fully upgrade your chalice, the chance of getting a double drop is almost guaranteed. Sometimes you can go 10 or more runs without seeing a double drop. Maybe we can input more runes into the chalice and get more loot accordingly. And 4, speaking of runes, maybe we could see some sort of return on all the runes we've been accumulating the past few weeks. Possibly some sort of rune transfer or ultra expensive price where we can trade in runes for opulent gear so they don't go wasted. Now, these are just a few suggestions, and I'd love to hear more of what you all have to say. Ultimately, this is a wonderful addition to the Destiny universe, Menagerie that is. I think it's a huge step in the right direction and would love to see more loot systems like this. Activities like this have such high potential to feel extremely rewarding and worth our time. It provides us with the opportunity to begin min-maxing builds in Destiny, something I thought I'd never say. Between grinding runes for endless hours, then using them as a currency to select our loot, I see lots of playtime going forward as long as it's done right. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good one.